not gonna see me bleed. Cause baby, I got you. I've been beaten to the ground, dragged across the dirt. I've been scared to live cause some people never learn. But they're not gonna watch me burn. Cause baby, I got you. It's a new beginnings and a better life. It's the dancing underneath the disco lights. They can try but they can never take me down. Ooh, cause I'm not afraid to love, not afraid to love you. I'm not afraid.
Welcome to Better Than Ever Live, wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening. Hope you're making today your masterpiece. On today's show, we're going to talk about how feeling younger might actually improve recovery from injuries or surgeries. We'll talk about the demographics who gained the most weight in the last decade. We'll talk about how sitting increases your risk of disease and death. We'll talk a little bit about intense exercise, how it depletes the body of calcium, how it might decrease hunger, that's always a good thing, and whether pickleball is actually a workout, whether that's intense exercise. I'm Dr. David Geier, double board certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injury, or medical history. Please understand, in this show, this live stream, and any video I do anywhere on my website, this is not medical advice. All the studies that we're going to talk about, I'm just giving you information for educational purposes only. If you have comments, questions, thoughts about the studies we talk about, please leave those in the chat if you're on YouTube, not in the comments because I cannot see the comments. All I can see is the chat. Facebook, LinkedIn, you know where to put all those. I'd love it if you'd put your first name and where you're located. It's always good to see where people are. Also remember, if you have medical questions, injury questions not related to what we talk about in this live stream, I will be here tomorrow, as I will be most every Friday for Ask Dr. Geier Live. That's when I do the injury questions, surgery, rehab, recovery, all of that kind of good stuff. That will be tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So let's start off talking about feeling younger and how it might improve your recovery from injuries or from illness or from surgery. So this has actually been studied, and I've got some thoughts on kind of, this is neat, but what exactly does it mean? But even for older people getting over physical disabilities, physical problems, injuries, conditions like strokes, things like that, it might actually, I cannot talk today, actually help us recover a little bit better. This was a study published in the journal Gerontology. The researchers studied almost 200 adults, older adults between the ages of 73 and 84, and they were recovering from one of two things: either osteoporosis fractures, that's the thin, weak, brittle bones, fractures usually of the spine, fractures of the wrist, or fractures of the hip, or they were recovering from a stroke and they were in rehab facilities throughout the country of Israel. Now, fractures usually result from falls. Strokes often also cause falls, which makes the people have trouble getting around on their own. So what these researchers did is they assessed what they called their functional independence at the time of admission, at the time of discharge, using this scale, the functional independence measurement test. What they found is people who felt younger when they were admitted to the hospital had improved functional independence when they were sent home a month later. And it was found in both the group recovering from osteoporosis fractures and the group recovering from stroke. They also found those who felt younger rehabbed better because they were more optimistic about their chances of regaining their functional abilities. It was more important, they're what we call subjective age, how old they felt, was the strongest predictor of their outcome from rehab, stronger even than how old they actually were, their chronological age, and multiple health conditions that they had, other medical problems that were found at the time of being admitted to the hospital. So people who feel younger than they actually are, they're younger than their chronological age, or they feel younger, typically are more healthy and they're more psychologically resilient. Now, to me, I think this is interesting, but I don't know necessarily what you use this information for. Yeah, maybe you work on optimism therapy and things to try to cheer people up and get them more hopeful that they'll recover a little bit quicker. But it's really not that easy to say, hey, feel younger than you are. Now, there are ways to figure out chronological age versus, say, biological age, which I've talked about a lot on this show, the DNA clocks and things like that tell you how old your DNA and your organs and how old your body really is, not just in chronological age. And that may be a much more important marker of aging, longevity. Maybe it plays a role in recovery from injury, but it is interesting. So I think that mental resilience, wellness, mindfulness, plus optimism may seem to play a role in all of these findings. All right, over the last 30, 40 years, America has gained a lot of weight, but specifically in the last decade, we've gained a lot of weight. There was a study that was just published in the Journal of Obesity. Researchers at BYU looked at the weight gain of almost 14,000 adults in this country. More than half of the American adults over the last decade gained 5% or more body weight. Now, more than a third of Americans gained 10% or more body weight, and almost 20% gained 20% or more body weight. Huge. I mean, so if you're 200 pounds anyway, then over the last decade, you put on another, very likely to have put on another 40 pounds. That is really, really interesting. Now, who were the people that tended to put on weight? Well, first of all, one of the things that was really important is women tended to put on more weight than men. Women gained 12 pounds over the last decade compared to 6 pounds for men. Also differed among races. Black women had the greatest average weight gain over the 10-year period, gaining almost 20 pounds. Asian men gained the least, just under 3 pounds. Now, here's what's interesting. When you look at the age groups that typically gained the most weight, you gained it in young and middle-aged adults, and you gained less weight as you got older. Basically, this is how it broke down. People in their 20s to 30s gained almost 18 pounds. 30s to 40s, just over 14 pounds. 40s to 50s, just under 10 pounds. And 50s to 60s, just under 5 pounds. If you gained the average amount of weight each decade of your adult life, you will have put on more than 45 pounds. By that measure, almost certainly you're going to be in the obese category, and that makes sense that just over 42% of adults in this country are currently obese. They meet the definition of obese. That's up from 30% 22 years ago, back in 2000. All right. Sitting is part of our problem. There's a new study out of Simon Fraser University in Vancouver that shows that sitting increases your risk of disease and potentially earlier death. They tracked more than 100,000 adults from 21 countries for over 10 years, and they found that more time spent sitting during the day was tied to a higher risk of early death and of heart disease. But the combination of prolonged sitting and being physically inactive was especially bad. That's where it was almost as bad as smoking. That's why you hear people say sitting is the new smoking. But here's the good news about sitting. Boosting physical activity, getting exercise somewhere, does appear to reduce the risks brought on by prolonged sitting. What they found is that if you sit 8 or more hours each day, you have a 20% higher risk of getting heart disease, 20% higher risk of dying from any cause over the next, in this case, the study time over the next decade or so. The ones that sat for 8 hours or more a day, not only that 20% increased risk of heart disease, almost 50% more likely to have heart failure. Now let's drop that down a little bit. Not more than 8 hours, just 6 to 8 hours. 12% higher risk of early death. 13% higher risk of heart disease. Now, the other thing that they saw in this study was that the benefits of being physically active and exercise were very, very clear. The people who sat the most and were least active had the highest risk, almost 50% greater risk of heart disease, early death. But the people who sat the most and were active, that risk dropped to only 17%. Now, obviously, those who sat the least and were most active, they had the least risk at all. So, if you have a job that makes you sit throughout the day, or you sit more than you'd like, and I'm one of those people as well, you got to find time to get exercise in any way you can throughout the day. Go for a run when you get home. Go to the gym, at the office. Climb stairs instead of taking the elevator. Stand up whenever you're taking a phone call. Put in your headset, your AirPods, whatever. Walk around the office while you're taking calls. Instead of sending emails to people in your office, walk across the office and talk to that person. Park at the back of the parking lot and walk that entire parking lot in instead of trying to park at the very, very front. Things like that. Find ways to get physical activity throughout your day. And then if you can cut the amount you sit, that's another benefit. All right, intense exercise. We're going to talk about that in a few studies here. It appears to deplete the body of calcium. This was a study done at the University of Colorado at their Anschutz Medical Campus. And what they found out is that exercise stimulates muscles. Obviously, we know that, and that is good for bone health. But intense exercise over a long period of time contributes to this metabolic pathway, this metabolic cascade that actually can lead to a loss of bone mineral density. They did this study in male and female cyclists, elite cyclists, over a year of training and competition. And what they found is the competitive cyclist bone mineral density decreased at a rate similar to that of postmenopausal women who lose bone because of estrogen loss that causes bone loss and increases their risk of osteoporosis. And these are not people necessarily that are in bad shape. They are competitive cyclists. But it's the first evidence that we've seen that exercise might actually hurt your bones. We always talk about weight-bearing exercise being good for the skeletal system, but there may be something about intense exercise. And the researchers speculate that when you're firing your muscles, the muscles contract, they pull calcium out as a way to ensure that the muscles have enough calcium to contract. It's also important the calcium is to your heart pumping. The problem with that is if you do it for a long period of time, it's going to just keep pulling that calcium out, and then those bones get weak. But they propose it's a protective mechanism. Protect the muscles, protect the heart. So that is something to think about as far as intense exercise. They speculate it's related to parathyroid hormone that's monitoring blood calcium levels. And the way they figured out that in the case of the cyclist, their bone was actually breaking down was that they measured a biomarker called CTX. It's a fragment of collagen, and it tells you basically that bone is breaking down. Calcium is coming out of the bones, going into the blood. And what they found out in these elite cyclists, their CTX levels remained elevated for 4 hours after exercise. So something to think about if you're an elite, marathoner, triathlete, somebody that trains hours a day. You might think of calcium supplementation. You might think of varying your exercise to protect your bones a little bit. I always kind of think when you see these elite runners, these marathon runners, triathletes, and they're so thin. And to me, I've always thought, I don't know how healthy that actually looks. I suspect if you did bone density studies, DEXA studies, you would see loss of bone mass in a fair number of them. All right, now one good part of intense exercise might be its effect on our appetite. Now, I'm sure if you exercise on a regular basis, if you have a really, really hard workout, at the end of it, you're just dying to eat something. But then sometimes you're not hungry at all. And there may actually be a physiological reason related to how intense exercise affects the production of chemicals within your body. Researchers say that this appetite suppression phenomenon is a real thing after intense exercise, and they say it's due to a molecule or a compound that they call LAC-Phe. Now, when you do more intense workouts, researchers have found larger amounts of this LAC-Phe in blood, whereas if you don't work out as hard, you don't have as much LAC-Phe in your blood. This production occurs mostly during vigorous exercise, and that LAC-Phe appears to suppress appetite, which is potentially what might help you reduce excess body fat. So when you increase at a high intensity, you go really hard, you feel your muscles burn. That's an increase in what's called lactate. That lactate is broken down by your body, and the metabolites of that lactate are formed. And one of those metabolites is that LAC-Phe. Now, the reason they think LAC-Phe may be involved in suppressing your appetite after workouts is what the researchers did is they basically injected that LAC-Phe into overweight and obese mice who were not exercising. Those mice ended up eating less and lost body fat compared to obese mice who didn't receive the injections of lack fee or those who are already lean. So maybe a potential benefit to intense workouts. And then the last thing is going to be a kind of a short show today, and that is good with me. But last thing I've got for you is pickleball. So my parents play pickleball down in South Florida. They love it. There are so many places here that were tennis centers. Tennis is a big sport here in Charleston that have added pickleball. There's leagues. It's been great. Now, it started with the baby boomers maybe getting older, not moving around as well, having injuries, couldn't move the court as much. But now we're starting to see younger people starting to play pickleball. The number of pickleball players 18 to 34 is going way, way up. If you don't know, pickleball is a combination of basically ping pong or table tennis, regular tennis, and badminton. It's played on a smaller court, 20 by 44 feet. And they don't have to cover as much ground. That's what makes it a great sport for people maybe not as quick, not as agile as they used to be, or they're overcoming an injury. Well, there were 2 recent studies, because there's been a lot of criticism of pickleball that it's not real exercise. You're not moving that much. So there were 2 studies that just came out, one out of Western State Colorado University. They put basically these portable units that tracked energy expenditure on 8 women, 7 men between the ages of 40 and 85 during a game of pickleball. They also did a number of different cardiometabolic tests, cholesterol and things like that, to see if pickleball benefited people from a cardiovascular health standpoint. They did this, let them play for 6 weeks. And what they found is during pickleball, these adults averaged a heart rate of 108 beats per minute. They burned 353.5 calories a match. Those 2 things classifies that game of pickleball as a moderate intensity workout. But here's what's even more interesting. They also, in their blood markers, had improvements in HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, even though that's a little misleading. They had improvements in LDL cholesterol, again, the supposed bad cholesterol, improvements in blood pressure, and improvements in oxygen uptake. So it definitely seems to help improve health. But here's this. Second study out of BYU wanted to see how demanding pickleball was compared to, say, a 30-minute walk. So they compared a 30-minute game of doubles pickleball to a 30-minute walk. 25 pickleball players, average age of 38. So these are younger. And they put fitness trackers on them with sensors measuring heart rate, step count, calories burned, both while doing a 30-minute walk and while playing 30 minutes of double pickleball. What they found out is that with pickleball, heart rates that were recorded were 14% higher, calorie expenditure 36% higher from playing pickleball compared to walking. So I don't know, something I think is really interesting. You've probably heard me say this. I am a big fan of whatever you like to do, physically active exercise, whatever you will do, that is the best type of exercise for you. And that is not the same for everybody. So yeah, if you're overcoming a knee or hip injury and you want to go out and play pickleball, I'm all for it. If you have any comments about the studies we talked about today, leave those. Otherwise, I'm going to say this: if you like videos like this, whether it's health, wellness, nutrition, exercise, aging, longevity, mental health, things like that, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Click the bell to be notified when I start a new live stream or when I release videos. If you have an orthopedic injury and you want to see somebody that's not just going to tell you cortisone shot, physical therapy, or surgery, but you want to hear about all your options that are out there to potentially help you avoid surgery, I'd love to help. I'm a double board certified, hopefully soon to be triple board certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and anti-aging and regenerative medicine expert. There's a link to my website in the description below, drdavidgeier.com. Go to the contact page, fill out that form, gets to my assistant, and we can work on getting you to Charleston to see me as a patient. I've gotten a number of people that have reached out to me for that purpose. Thank you so much for joining. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow if you have orthopedic questions for Ask Dr. Geier Live, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Take care.